Hello, everybody. I'm Maria Millan from the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. It's wonderful to be here at the World Stem Cell Summit 2022. In the next few moments, I'll just be giving a historical perspective as well as a look into the future with the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, or CIRM. Many of you recall that CIRM was first formed in 2004 through a citizen-led bond measure, Proposition 71, that dedicated $3 billion in funding to stem cell research. In the course of years leading up to today, CIRM has created a brand and has built an ecosystem as a patient-centric funder, partner, accelerator, and de-risker for basic, translational, and clinical research, funding infrastructure and education programs to build the future for the new field of regenerative medicine. And most recently, in November 2020, amid the COVID pandemic and social unrest and lots of major things happening in the world, citizens of California voted for science and passed Proposition 14 to dedicate $5.5 billion and reauthorize CIRM. With this, CIRM was able to continue its mission, which has always been to serve patients through advancing science. And we revised, or not revised, but actually just restated our mission statement to really capture what we have planned for the upcoming decade. So CIRM's mission is accelerating world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. Through the years, CIRM has funded over $3 billion of programs spanning 5 major pillars: discovery, translational research, that's the research that it takes to get things that are discovered, the science that's discovered, and to turn them into potential treatments; clinical research, that's the clinical trials to test these potential treatments; education programs to build the workforce and leaders of tomorrow; and infrastructure, initially building infrastructure, and then also program infrastructure to address the gaps and the needs of this new field. And I'll just be describing some of that in the upcoming slides. By funding these programs, CIRM has advanced research broadly across disease areas. And currently, you can see that there's a growing number of programs addressing solid tumors, which is still an unmet medical need. Even with the advent of CAR T therapy, solid tumors is still a major area that we need treatments. There are very few treatments for these devastating conditions. In addition, blood cancer, heart disease, musculoskeletal, and importantly, neural diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, another area of unmet medical need that specifically was pointed out, and the new proposition that we need to continue to advance research in this area as well as all the others. Importantly, 40% of CIRM's portfolio is in rare disease. So as individual diseases, these are all small numbers of patients. That's why they're called rare diseases. But in aggregate, this represents a significant number of conditions, fatal conditions, and debilitating conditions that afflict babies, infants, and older individuals. While addressing a broad range of disease indications, CIRM deploys a diverse therapeutic modality, including mostly gene therapy and cell and gene therapy, but also biologics like monoclonal antibodies and small molecules that either target stem cells and regenerative medicine targets or use stem cells for the treatment. So these are all either used in combination or separately, depending on the needs of the biology to combat the particular disease. In total, CIRM has funded over 1,200 projects and now 80 clinical trials, primarily first in human clinical trials, but now we have more and more progressing along to later stages. These address across over 75 disease indications And over 3,000 patients have been enrolled in these clinical trials thus far. They span the gamut from first in human small clinical trials to larger pivotal phase 3 clinical trials or registration trials, the stage of clinical trials where the product could potentially be approved by the FDA for more wider distribution and commercialization. They span from common diseases to rare diseases. And through some of these trials, we've already shown that this approach has led to cures. And I will give a little bit more detail and example of some of those programs. That really gives us not just hope, but tangible information that this approach is feasible and that it is safe and something that can be developed for a wide range of diseases. With funding, CIRM has also established a unique network called the Alpha Clinics Network that specializes in stem cell and regenerative medicine clinical trials. With Prop 14, the Alpha Clinics Network is going to be expanded and even be able to offer even more specialized ways of being able to advance the research, but also get ready for when these programs are into the clinics, approved for therapy, and can be more widely distributed and accessible across communities. The CIRM programs were among the first to receive an expedited pathway called the Regenerative Medicine Advanced Therapy designation, RMAT, from the FDA, which is a special designation that allows very interactive and collaborative work along with the FDA to figure out the best way to determine whether the clinical trials are yielding the results to continue its development. By these types of pathways, the development of these programs can therefore be accelerated, and there are ways to more feasibly and realistically kind of look at the data and determine the best design for these programs, because they are so unique and very different from the classic types of treatments that have been developed in the past with small molecules and even antibodies. Here's the example that I alluded to that shows that regenerative medicine and cell and gene therapy can in fact lead to results that are unprecedented and have not been achievable with any type of modern medicine or approaches. This is a picture of Evie. Evie is now 10 years old. Evie as a baby was part of a clinical trial. The PI, the investigator, was Dr. Donald Cohn at UCLA. And Evie's blood stem cells were recovered from her as a child through a vein. Those stem cells were then corrected. You see, she was born with this condition called ADA SCID, which is adenosine deaminase deficiency that causes SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency, which is just a fancy way of saying that she was born without an immune system, which is a devastating condition. It's also known as the bubble baby disease. So when her blood stem cells were collected, the ADA, which was missing, was returned through gene therapy into her blood stem cells and then back into her as a baby. And those blood stem cells that were corrected can go back into her bone marrow. And because they're stem cells, give rise to all of the blood lineages, including the immune cells. We know it works, and we know it worked then because she started forming these immune cells, and it could be detected in her blood. And that is quite remarkable. And now 10 years later, those blood stem cells are still giving rise to normal, healthy immune cells. So taking a condition where she was a baby and anything, even a common cold or any illness could have been fatal because she didn't have an immune system to fight it, to today, where Evie now lives a normal life as a little girl. She can get immunized because her immune system can respond to it, so she can be protected against viruses, and she can fight things such as the common cold. Not only Evie, but 50 other patients were treated with the same approach. And in the New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Cohn and his colleagues reported 100% event-free survival at 2 years, with 90% cure rate at 2 years and 100% cure at 3 years. This is something that is remarkable. It's something that is tangible, it's measurable, and it is something that is hard to say that it's just hope, because it's actually real life. Evie is a little girl who goes to school now. There are 49 other babies who are now children who have functional immune systems. So what's the result of this? This shows us that this approach can be used for other types of conditions. In fact, CIRM is also funding trials and other different forms of blood disorder that are different, but can be used, but the same type of approach can be used, like X-linked severe combined immunodeficiency, Artemis, severe combined immunodeficiency, a different type of immune dysfunction called X-linked chronic granulomatous disease, which just means the white blood cells don't gobble up bacteria and protect us like they normally do. Leukocyte adhesion deficiency 1, which is now in clinical trials, another form of immune deficiency, and cystinosis, which is a metabolic disorder that results in eye disease and kidney disease because of a metabolic dysfunction. All of these are underway and are showing some preliminary signs that the approach is working. So now the clinical trials are ongoing. The success in these indications mark the beginning for potential cures for over 6,000 currently untreatable genetic diseases. Another disease area which you probably heard about on the panel with Kevin McCormack, one of my colleagues from CIRM, as well as Adrian Shapiro, one of the staunch patient advocates for sickle cell disease, talked about this devastating condition that affects 100,000 Americans, but affects millions globally. This is because this condition results from a single point mutation, a single typo in the gene that leads to an altered protein. So the red blood cells are not normal. Under stress, they sickle up and they block off the blood vessels. It results in horrendous complications. Patients get these painful episodes, mini strokes, and hospitalizations. It affects very young people. So it really hampers their ability to conduct normal education in their lives and careers. And in fact, it impacts the lifespan, cutting it almost in half. What's even worse is that there's expected to be a growth in the number of sickle cell disease of patients afflicted with the disease globally, rising by 30% by 2050. Thankfully, in the recent years, there have been such improvements in the ability to fix this gene defect through a variety of different ways, using CRISPR and using viral delivery to fix the gene or replace the protein. I'm not going to go into every specific type, but you can see in this list at least 4, and we have more in the portfolio, but these 4 specifically use an ex vivo gene therapy approach to correct the defect that leads to sickle cell. Another thing that's really remarkable in this chart is you can see that this also involves a very significant partnership that we have with the NIH, with the Heart, Lung, Blood Institute for the Cure Sickle Cell Initiative. This is an example of partnership and of knowledge sharing so that we can advance the cures and the progress in science. And so you can see in the chart that we have programs from the preclinical stage to early stage clinical development and follow-on clinical trials, using a variety of different approaches for either gene correction or gene replacement. In another example that really highlights the partnership with academia and specialized experts in medical centers, along with the scientists, and the funding and expertise and collaboration is a program at UCSF with Dr. Tippy McKenzie, who's a pediatric surgeon, as the PI. Dr. McKenzie was funded early on in her career by CIRM to conduct basic research, which led her to an interest in applying this eventually and developing this for the clinics. As a pediatric surgeon, she has the ability to, and she was trained to be able to perform surgery in babies even while they're still in utero. And one of the programs she developed is an in utero treatment for a fatal disorder called alpha thalassemia, which is a type of anemia that results from the alpha chain of the hemoglobin being totally missing. What results from this is that babies often don't go to term. They result in stillbirth. There is some treatment in that they can get in transfusions while they're in utero, but eventually need to get a transplant from their mother or from a matched donor in order for them to be able to produce normal blood cells. But that is also fraught with complications of graft versus host disease. So Dr. McKenzie developed an approach where she could do an in utero bone marrow transplant from the mother. The advantage of this is in utero, the babies have the chance to become tolerant to the mother's blood cells, recognizing them as self. So it's twofold. One is that they get the replacement of the missing normal red blood cells, but then they also get tolerized so that they eventually can be accept the bone marrow transplant from their mothers and accept those cells as self. So it's a very sophisticated approach. Dr. McKenzie is still in the process of conducting this trial. There have been several patients who had gone through this. This is a picture of baby Ileana, the first baby who was born after in utero transplant. Some early results from this baby, as well as the others who were enrolled, showed safety and some preliminary evidence that, in fact, there were some signs of tolerance, so-called chimerism. That means that the mother cells and the baby cells coexisted, are tolerant of each other. And some of the initial results have been published, and we'll hear more about that. The significance of this is this approach could also be used for other types of blood disorders with in utero transplant. As another example, this is a program, again, very specialized in that it requires surgery with stem cell sciences and manufacturing and all these specialties to come together. In this case, it's at UC Davis with a PI of Dr. Diana Farmer. This program is for a condition called spina bifida. Spina bifida is a condition where in development, babies don't have the normal closing of the spinal cord. So their nerves are all exposed. That leads them to damage. And this eventually, when they're born, results in paralysis and other damage, including things such as increased fluid in the brain called hydrocephalus. So Dr. Farmer has been at this for a while. She's a specialist in pediatric transplant. She was also involved in research before stem cell research that showed that there is some initial benefit in decreasing complications with just closing the covering over the spinal cord, but it doesn't quite fix all of the downstream issues. There's still nerve damage and there's still paralysis. So Dr. Farmer and her team pursued research in this area and showed, both in the lab as well as in preclinical studies in bulldogs that were born with this defect, that by fixing the defect with stem cells on a matrix, so it's a covering plus stem cells, that they had results where that there was functional improvement and that they could avoid paralysis in the animal models and the preclinical models. With this promising result, CIRM continued to fund this research with Dr. Farmer in the early stages, and now is funding the clinical trial of 6 babies. That trial has been initiated. So this is really exciting, and we'll hear more about that in the future. Again, a unique application of stem cells that really requires partnership between academia, the clinical specialists, and the scientists, and all those involved in the manufacturing. To shift gears a little bit, strong medicine starts with strong science and strong basic science. CIRM, as mentioned in the very beginning, has funded almost $1 billion in basic research, as well as enabling types of infrastructure that supports basic research, such as genomics research, and creating the world's largest stem cell bank, so diseases can be studied in a dish. And this has resulted in the generation of over 3,000 peer-reviewed publications. There have been, CIRM has funded 12 stem cell research facilities and shared laboratories across the state. As mentioned, the largest human-induced pluripotent stem cell repository for research and drug discovery, and created novel information and genomics information in stem cells, and stem cells that have been used to differentiate into different tissues and study diseases. In addition, while the science and the clinical development is really important, in order for it to get broadly, for therapies to get broadly distributed, it does need to partner up with industry so that it can deploy the commercialization pathway to get efficiently to patients. And CIRM has attracted, but CIRM funding and CIRM programs have attracted significant industry partnership and investment over the years. As you can see in this arrow, in 2014, we had approximately $40 million in industry partnership. And then over the course of the past 6 years, this has grown in a hockey stick fashion to over $18 billion in partnerships. CIRM has enabled the spin out of 46 companies from academia, and 50% or over half of CIRM programs are partnered with industry so that they can take it to commercialization. 6 of our portfolio companies have gone public so that the public can be involved in funding this research. And there have been all sorts of financing and acquisitions that have led to these programs continuing on. Importantly, I mentioned the education pillar. CIRM programs have funded the building of leaders in the workforce of tomorrow who are well-trained and immersed in the field of stem cell and regenerative medicine through a variety of education programs. In the undergraduate level, and even as early as in the high school level through our summer high school internship. So undergrads, postdocs in the CIRM Scholar Program, their real world kind of exposure in the Alpha clinics as fellows, the Bridges program that bridges interactions between students in Cal States and community colleges, as well as the University of California system and other private universities where there may be more established labs. And then we recently launched a Compass training program, which is intended to promote mentorship and training and of diverse populations of students who come into the system to increase their probability of being exposed to and access careers in stem cell and regenerative medicine. So with these programs, even to date, over 3,000 students and scholars have been trained. And then in the course of doing all this, this stimulates the California economy. Eventually, obviously, with the development of treatments, it'll stimulate the industry, the biopharma industry. But even before that, just stimulating the activities has generated tax revenues and created over 60,000 new jobs. With that, we're very excited that we launched the new CIRM strategic plan. And I'm going to be really excited in the upcoming years to report on the progress of this plan. Already, we have launched programs to accomplish the three major pillars of advancing world-class science, delivering real-world solutions, and providing opportunity for all. Within these categories, what we seek to do is continue to promote team science, collaborations, key partnerships, develop shared resources, and build knowledge networks so that we can accelerate the transfer of knowledge, accelerate the whole field, and lift all boats in the service of patients. Deliver real-world solutions so that we can increase the advancements of therapies to marketing approval, creating solutions to bottlenecks commercialization, such as manufacturing partnerships network, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as this unfolds. Expansion of the clinical networks that I had mentioned, the Alpha Clinics network, and then also creating the Community Care Centers of Excellence, which is a new component of the Prop 14. The reason for this is while we have been developing these programs in academic centers, in order for it to really be accessible and tangible to the real world, we need to have the partnerships and the ability to integrate this into the community settings, and also to derive from the community settings their expertise, their input, and their involvement in this whole process. And then finally, provide opportunity for all. CIRM has incorporated systemically through our funding mechanisms, through how we partner with our researchers, to build in diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of how we design the research, how we promote the research, how we make sure that in clinical trials that it's accessible and that there's as much as possible a diverse group of patients coming in, so it's representative of who this is going to serve eventually, as well as a major goal for us is delivering a roadmap for access and affordability. So once these treatments are created, they're out there and they're available, we want to make sure that if they're accessible to those in need, otherwise all of this would have been for naught. So these are all bold goals, but we have tangible concept development and program announcements, collaborations, and a strategy to execute on this. And I will be very excited. I will, and the rest of my team will be very excited to continue to update the community on the progress in these three pillars of our strategy. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and for allowing me to share some of the progress at CIRM and our plans for the upcoming years. Thank you very much. I'm done.